Hello friends, and welcome back to my channel. So it is week 3 of the Three Rivers Pantry challenge, which isn't really a challenge for me because this is the way I cook normally. I normally cook out of my pantry, my fridge, my freezer, and I've been doing that exclusively for the last year. So the only thing that is the challenge is the no spend part. I am not spending anything on groceries or anything in the month of January and February. I usually break fast with oatmeal in the morning between 12:30 and 1 o'clock, but today it is special for me because I am home alone, whoop whoop, and it's 1:15, so I decided to do it up. So I am going to make my breakfast from some other pantry staples, some hash browns and water glass eggs. I don't do this very often, but I thought today would be a nice day to do it. So what I'm going to do is soak my hash browns, or my potatoes at this point, in warm water. Now I like to do it this way because I can measure out how many I want. So all I'm going to do is measure out what I want, and then I'm going to cover it with some boiling water. And I'm just going to put a saucer over it and let them sit for about 10 to 12 minutes, depending on how they look. At 10 minutes, I might go with that, or 12 minutes in total. So I let them sit for the full 12 minutes, and I'm going to season them. Now, a lot of people do this different, but I like to season them right here in the bowl that I have them in, and I have drained off the excess water if there was any. And usually, 9 times out of 10, there is a little bit. So I drained off as much water as I could, and I'm just going to add my seasonings in it. My no salt seasonings, onion powder, and garlic powder, the usual suspects. So after that, I'm just going to fry them. Now, I learned this trick, of course, from YouTube. I have been frying my hash browns where they tell you to, on the box, where they tell you move them around, put them in, move them around, and let them brown that way. But they never really got really brown and crisp. Now, I saw somebody else do this. Now, what they did was they actually browned them by just letting them sit there. I add a little bit of olive oil in with my butter because I like butter and sometimes it burns. So when I find that I do this, I put some olive oil in and then it's fine. So all I do is now put in my hash browns and then just let them sit. Don't do anything to them. Don't move them around. Don't fuss with them. Just let them sit on a medium-high fire until they get nice and crisp on one side. So while I'm doing that, in the same bowl, I'm going to crack my water glass eggs, making sure that they are good by using the float test and definitely using the smell test before I actually crack them into the bowl that I'm using. And they look fine, and they were great. These ones are probably about a year and a half old now, and they are going strong. So I'm going to add my spices in, again, the same ones I use all the time. And then once my hash browns are browned on one side, I'm going to flip them and let them brown on the second side undisturbed. I have my eggs here ready once my hash brown comes out of the frying pan, and I have some hot sauce that I made, some green hot sauce that I made last year, and I'm going to put those onto my eggs. And literally, I stretch my eggs. I don't know if anybody else does this with a little bit of milk. Do you do that? So this is my breakfast today. Some scrambled eggs with toasted hash browns, and then just a little bit of green hot sauce on the top, and it was so good. And I also sprinkled a little bit of cheese on the top of my eggs just to give it a little bit of cheesiness. So for tonight's dinner, I'm going to stick with the egg theme, and I'm going to use my water glass eggs to make some quiche. I have some kale here. Somebody once asked me how I use my kale, and I use it interchangeably as spinach or even Swiss chard. Now, I can use it as a side. I would fry up onions and peppers and put the kale in or the spinach in or even the Swiss chard and use it as a side. I've used it in lasagna. I am going to be using it in a quiche, as you will see tonight. Anywhere you can use the spinach, I interchange it sometimes with kale or even Swiss chard, and that's how I use my kale. I have a can of cream of mushroom soup. I have some cheese. I have some cream cheese that I canned, 2022 I canned this. And then I have some Ritz crackers, which I vacuum sealed back also in 2022, February of 2022. And these are the roasted vegetable ones. I only have a few left. So I was thinking I might try to make a crust out of these. I think it will work. And I have my pan here. Now this is a bigger one. This is the 100th anniversary of Pyrex, and it's a little bigger than the regular one. It's 9.5. So every time I make a actually crust and stuff, I have to make it a little bigger. And then I have the last of that jar of pork that I used in a couple of dishes previously, so I want to get that used up. I'm trying to clean out my fridge so nothing gets pushed to the back and wasted. So the first thing I'm going to do is drain the liquid off my kale, and I'm not going to actually throw that liquid away. I'm going to use that for something else. Not tonight, but one night I will use that. So the first thing I'm going to do is, after straining my kale, I'm going to mash these crackers up and get them down into a pie crust. And I'm just using my handy dandy rolling pin to do that, and I left them in the vacuum seal bag and they worked perfectly. A sandwich bag probably would have broken open by now, but in this vacuum seal bag it was perfect. So I hope is enough of the crackers, and then I actually melted about 4 tablespoons of butter. So hopefully this will be enough to fill up that pie pan, and we're gonna see. If not, I can mash up some more and make a little bit more of the crust. So I'm just got that all mixed together, and I'm just going to mash it down into my pie pan. I found using a metal spoon worked a lot better than the silicone one I was using earlier. It pushed it in more firmly than the silicone one. So now for my filling. Yep, you guessed it, I'm using butter. Anyway, I wanted to fry up my onions and my peppers because I did pull them out of my freezer and they are frozen. So I guess if I wanted this to cool down, I don't really need it to cool down because it's going to go into that pie crust that I just made, and it's going to go into an oven. Now if I wanted it to cool down, I would have made this first and then worked on my pie crust. I didn't think it really mattered because everything's going to go into the oven anyway. So here are my frozen peppers that I pulled out of my freezer. And I'm also going to be putting in some onions as well. And get that just sauteed through somewhat. So while my onions and peppers are sauteing, I'm going to put a couple of cloves of fresh garlic. The last one's from my garden last year, and that was probably the second last onion. I think I want to eat the last onion fresh on a salad, even though I don't have any lettuce at this time, but whatever. So those are nicely sauteed together, and I'm going to add in my kale and get that all incorporated as well. And I did chop it up a bit more because I leave it kind of big. If I'm using it for a side, I want sort of big chunks. So I chopped it down a little bit more to go into the quiche. So now that I have that thoroughly incorporated, I'm going to add my cream cheese, only because it's kind of still on the cold side. And then I'm going to add in my cream of mushroom soup. I'm probably going to add most of this canned, depending on how much I need for the actual filling of the quiche. And this is going to be the majority of the filling, and I'm going to pull back a little bit on the eggs. I saw a recipe that called for 12 eggs, and then I saw another one that called for 2 eggs, and then I saw another one that called for 5 eggs. So I'm going for kind of in the middle at 5 eggs. Okay, so here are my 5 eggs, and I'm just going to add a little bit of my home canned evaporated milk into it, and just mix those up with the seasonings. So here's my roasted vegetable cracker pie crust with the filling in it, and I'm just going to pour the eggs over it. So I'm just going to take a fork and just move around the filling, make sure all the eggs get incorporated. And it was at this moment I realized that I had forgotten something really important. And what would that be, you say? I actually forgot to put in the pork. Yep, I forgot to put in the meat. So what I'm going to do is just take a little bit of this meat, and I'm just going to take my fork again and just work it into the filling. And that's what I'm going to do. And once I've worked the meat down into the filling, I'm just going to sprinkle it with a little bit of cheese and get it into the oven. So here it is, all ready to go with the cheese on top, ready to go into the oven at 350 degrees for, in my case, it was about 45 minutes. And that was probably about 5 or 10 minutes too long because I think the crust got a little bit too brown. Now that's probably because of the crust I used. It went in brown, but that's okay. In the end, it tastes delicious, even though the crust was a little bit browner than I would have liked. I was waiting for the top to brown up. And here is what it looks like on the plate. I will say the filling was actually really good. I could eat it by itself. So at least once a week I try to clear out my fridge of any and everything I can use for dinner. And as you can see, it is quite empty at the moment. And I will say this is pretty much what it looks like on the regular here lately. So that liquid from the kale the other night, and the leftover pork, the never-ending pork jar. I've probably used this pork about 4 times now. Then I have a little bit of pasta sauce left that I'm going to use up. And then I'm soaking some rice. So tonight we're going to have a rice dish. Yep, you know it. There is butter. Any recipe, any meal that I make that doesn't start with butter, something's got to be wrong with me. So I am going to make a roux, and I am going to make sort of like, I don't know, a sauce to go over my rice. And I'm going to make some veg on the side. So you've seen me do this 1,000,001 times. I'm going to make a roux of equal parts butter and flour. And I'm using the last of that pork. I want this jar of pork gone from my fridge. It's not a lot, but it's enough to make a meal. And I'm going to stretch it by, first of all, using that roux. That's going to help me stretch it. And I'm also going to be putting in some mushrooms in order to help stretch it as well. You can use lentils. There's so many things you can use to stretch a meat. You can stretch it with oats. There's so many things. Just do a little bit of research, find out what you like. And I usually use mushrooms. 9 times out of 10, I use mushrooms, and they seem to work out great. Now, if I had lentils, I probably should can up some lentils because I know I have some in my long-term storage, but I don't. And I think I will be experimenting a little bit more with lentils in the coming weeks. So look forward to that. And always rinse out those jars. Don't forget those little bits of the end. That's where all the flavor settles, at the bottom of your jars. Rinse them out. Get that flavor into your dish. And I'm using a diced tomatoes. And this one has oregano and basil already in it, so that saves you on spices if you don't want to add or don't have a lot of added spices that you can add into your dish. And yes, here it comes again. What? With a little added twist. There is butter involved, but I'm not using any flour this time. I'm going to switch it up. So I am going to make what I call candied carrots or caramelized carrots. So I'm using butter, some brown sugar. I'm going to use some ginger, and I use a pinch of salt in mine, and it seems to enhance the taste of the brown sugar and the ginger. So I just bring these together, Some recipes call for water. I don't put any water in mine because I'm using wet carrots. Now I can see if you were using like fresh carrots. Mine's are already canned because that's what I have available, and they're already wet, so I don't add any water to mine. But if you want to add water to yours like the recipe calls for, then go right ahead. But I'm just adding in my carrots without any water, and I'm just going to toss them in that caramelized brown sugar, ginger, and butter, and a little pinch of salt, and I'm going to reduce it down to its kind of sort of a thicker syrup consistency, and that's going to warm my carrots through, and that's going to be my side for tonight. I call it candied carrot, and this is what it looks like on the plate. I got my sauce over my rice and the carrots on the side. And this can be stretched to fit as many as you need. Like I was saying, stretch that meat because that's the most expensive thing in the meal. For this week's sweet treat, I made an apple crisp. Now, if you want to see exactly how I made this, I put a long video on Friday, uploaded on Friday, for Flour It Up if you want to see exactly how I made this and tips and tricks. So here it is, all out of the oven, all brown and bubbly, and this probably won't even last the weekend. It's Friday, but still, this is not going to last any time in my household, but it smells delicious. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe and click that notification bell to be notified when I upload videos.